Hey everyone, welcome back to Rising Stronger. Um, I know a lot of you have been listening to me, but I wanted to let you know that I've been giving it some thought, and I don't know if I'm going to make every single one of my podcasts a video because I'm going to be honest, sometimes I do it when I'm still in my PJs and glasses on and keeping it real, 'cause that's what I like to do. But when I am somewhat put together for the day and I happen to be recording, I thought maybe I would start doing videos, even if it is just me. So if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, when I talk about coming to watch me, I'm on YouTube. My channel, I'm looking at it, is Lisa Schoen, comma, MA, and then comma LPC, and that stands for, my name and my credentials, Master of Arts, Licensed Professional Counselor. Um, and for anyone who does not know me personally, my last name is spelled Shohen. Anyway, so you could come check me out, you could listen to me, whatever is best. But I just wanted to do a follow-up from my last podcast. I came on to talk about the incredible experience I had at the retreat that I went to. And, it was one of the best experiences I've had and so life-changing. But now it's 2 weeks out. And so I thought it would be worth talking about the post-retreat letdown that myself and some of the women in the group have, been talking about together. And what I mean by that, the retreat was not a letdown to me whatsoever. But it was funny because, a lot of us were saying, we left there having done such deep inner work, and just feeling so light and happy, or maybe a mixture of, you know, lightness and joy and happiness. And also for some, it was equally as myself included. One thing I noticed is I was exhausted for days, because you're doing a lot of intentional deep work. Um, but yeah, I was thinking about it, and when I was in specializing in the eating disorder field, there were times where some of my clients would need a higher level of care and they would need to go to an inpatient facility. And I was thinking about it, I felt such a stark contrast, and I have a pretty good situation to come home to, but like I felt the stark contrast just coming from this 3-day amazing retreat to like, whoop, time to jump back into life and reality and adulting and working and kids and life, all the things. And yeah, I hit the ground running, but I was thinking about it and like that was a 3-day retreat. And as a therapist, I'm very well resourced. I teach, so obviously I know a lot of tools and self-care, and you've heard a lot of them here on the podcast. But for some people, whether they're leaving an incredible retreat, or for some people who might be leaving an intensive outpatient facility, or people coming out of rehab for different addictions, you know, it's gotta be 10 times harder than the shifts that I noticed. So I thought maybe it would be a good idea to make a follow-up episode to talk about like the best ways, um, to kind of reintegrate back into real life after you've had one of those kind of situations. Um, and the way I used to explain it to my clients that would go to inpatient, you know, some of them couldn't wait to go and couldn't wait for this fresh start and like a jump start into healing and getting on a healthier path. Others weren't thrilled to have to go because eating disorders, similarly to addictions, sometimes could have an element of denial or just like with people with addictions, like until you want to get ready, some people are just aren't motivated, wanting and willing, but it would boil down to life or death situations at times. But what I would say is whether they were going willingly or because they had to, I would explain usually when you first get there, you have this like, oh crap, what did I do? moment where you're like second guessing your decision. Did I make the right choice coming here? Obviously, at least for me, going to the retreat, I didn't have any of that. Like I couldn't wait to go. But for something more intensive, you may experience that. But once you're in and you're settled into the routine and start to feel more comfortable with the staff and people around you, I would often describe it as like, not that any of us remember, but like being in our mother's womb. Like you're in this nice, safe, warm, cozy bubble. And the same people who initially might not have wanted to go may have a really hard time leaving to go back home, back to life, because it's so healing. You do a lot of intensive work. You have great supports, and especially for an inpatient facility, you have like constant, ongoing supports in place, and you know groups all the time and one-on-ones and and you're going from this safe place that really fosters growth and healing back out. It's kind of like being in that mother's womb and now we're thrust out into the cold dark world. And especially nowadays with the way things are here, at least in the United States. But yeah. But I noticed like that's sort of what it felt like just leaving this retreat where I mean again my home and my life here I'm very blessed, but I know a lot of people aren't. So I was greeted by my family and my daughter staying up way too late to give me a hug when I came home, and my dog acts like she's never seen me before. And, everyone was so happy. And I couldn't wait to get home to them and share the experience. And, but not everyone has it as good. Um, I know even on the retreat, like some people were going home to very sick relatives, hard caregiving responsibilities, people whose spouses may be in a really tough place in recovery if they're working at all, just different hardships. And so we've been having some discussions as a group, and I thought I would share a little bit of like things that we've been sharing, and also I came up with like a little list I put together of things that a person can do to reacclimate. Um, so tip number one, if whether you're leaving a amazing retreat like I went to, or you're leaving like an intensive place, key number one, I think, is like making sure that you stay connected with safe. Safe is the key word. Safe friends, safe family, safe supports. Like I told you, some of these women, all of the women were so incredible, and I really hope to stay connected. And the one thing I loved about the retreat that I don't think I mentioned was the morning everything was ending. We all were sitting around together and kind of just sharing our different experiences. And then the therapist talked about, like, okay, we're going home now. Like, time to plan and transition, and they talked about like things to add to life coming home, and then sometimes things to remove. And sometimes those things to remove may be people, especially for somebody struggling with addiction. Prior to going in, there's a good chance you might have been surrounding yourself with other people in addiction, right? Because we, birds of a feather, we tend to flock toward certain people at times. And on my work pages, I have this really cool picture demonstration of like a completely rotted strawberry. And next to it was a strawberry touching it, and that was half rotted. And then next to that was a fresh strawberry who was just starting to rot just by having this close contact with these rotting fruits. And I'm not trying to say that people with addiction are rotting fruits, but what I am saying is they're not necessarily living a life that aligns with their integrity, their value. They're struggling, and sometimes they want to find like-minded people who will participate. So if you are struggling with an addiction, there are some people that you may need to leave behind, even though they could be wonderful friends in so many ways. Um, you don't want to be around people who can become a stumbling block for you. You really want to be intentional with like surrounding yourself with motivating people, people who are actively working on themselves. Like I told you, we started a Marco Polo with the women from this group and a little online chat for those who don't have time or desire to Marco. And I loved it because already, like, we were all kind of commiserating together about missing each other, missing the experience. But we were also sharing, like, hey, I've been doing this and I've been doing that, to continue on what we took away from the retreat and just giving each other, like, the tips, the motivation, seeing each other's faces. It really is nice. For those who may be struggling with whether it's an eating disorder or addiction, before you leave that facility, you you're if you're in a good place, they should be 100% setting you up for success. Like for some people, they shouldn't even be going home. They should be transferring to a sober living. Some people, if they are returning home, they should be returning home with not just a therapist, but a specialist. I was talking to somebody recently, and there are lots of therapists out there. And I used to specialize in one thing. I don't specialize in just one thing. There's a few things that I do, but I can honestly say like I've put in the time, the work, the training, the effort to know what I'm talking about. Um, but for those, there are some therapists who claim to treat a whole broad spectrum of things. And when you're dealing with especially addiction, I would really caution you with that. You want somebody who has specialized training in that area. You also want to make sure you're set up with a sponsor, that you have access to meetings, that you have access to groups, to individual therapy. Like that should all be in place before you even leave. Um, if you're in like an inpatient facility, I also think it's important to do some type of like family, like if you're going back home to family, having like a family session to kind of discuss what this transition time should look like, how the family can show up and support the kind of the do what to do, what not to do type of thing. Um, just to really be grounded going back to real life. Um, Another thing, I was talking about with these women was At the retreat, it was so nice because we stayed at this incredible place and they had somebody there who made all the meals for us. And by the way, if he's listening, they were delicious. Um, every single one. But that was the nice part. We're in this beautiful place with all of our real life adulting. We didn't have to cook or clean. I mean, you clean up after yourself, but like all of the things that we have to do on a day-to-day basis, those pressures were taken off of us. And literally our entire time there was put into, you know, group sessions, these deeper experiential activities, individual time to journal and process, time to connect. Like it was 24/7, like intentional healing if you wanted it. Um, Real life doesn't unfortunately work like that, you know. Um, we are immediately like I said, I hit the ground running, jumping back into work. I had a funeral to attend, a bar mitzvah to attend, sick pets to deal with, like just all these different podcasting to do. Like I had all these different things, just and taking care of the kids stuff, and um, but I was saying in the group, and you've heard me if you've listened to my podcast for a while, we all have tons and tons going on in our lives, or at least a lot of us do. And I have learned like my self-care is a non-negotiable. I have to do, I call them my dailies every day because I know that's how I feel the best. That's how I show up the best for others. I experienced what it was like to live in that drained, unhappy energy, and I will not do that ever again. Like, my dailies are important, but again, sometimes even I don't have the luxury of just sitting down and doing yoga for an hour or journaling for an hour, or processing through my feelings for so I was explaining on the Marco, like sometimes it's helpful to break it up into like, here are things I can do when I only have 5 minutes. Here are things I can do when I have 15 minutes. Here are things I can do when I have an hour or a couple of hours or half a day. And, like really break it up into what are cup filling things that light me up, things that bring me joy or meaning and purpose that I can do quickly. Or if you go back to my episode on pockets of joy, like if you add intention to things you're already doing, sometimes you could even take your daily stuff and spice it up a little bit to become a self-care activity. But I think that having some kind of schedule, I find it's kind of ironic, but if I have a day to do everything or anything I want to, I'm not usually as, when I say productive, I mean even in a good self-care intentional kind of way, as I am when maybe I have more of a structured day and it's like, okay, here's what I'm working with. How can I structure things out to make sure I'm getting in those important things? And you want to make sure, if possible, you incorporate time for work, but also those hobbies, exercise, relaxation. For me, I think connecting to ourselves on a daily basis, like just having some quiet time. Um, and that helps me connect best with God, or if you call it higher power, whatever. Um, Also circling back, as I mentioned, like you want to make sure, if possible, that you secure yourself a safe living environment. Um, Going back to somebody with addiction, you want to make sure, if possible, your home is free of triggers, your home is free of, definitely free of substances. And again, if possible, free of toxic people that are not good for your mental health, physical health. Um, and I was just talking to somebody separately today about, if you have triggers in your home, um, ways that you could change it up where like if we don't not most of us don't have a budget to just change our entire house, but moving furniture around, changing pictures, painting, just things to make that old environment different without breaking the bank. Um, or you could intentionally do healing work in spots around the house that once triggered you. And then what you're doing is you're creating that corrective experience. You're taking ownership and power back from something that once was correlated with something negative, or a trigger. And now you can say, oh, but I remember the time I really intentionally worked hard to heal, and that's part of my healing journey. But again, that's only if you can't remove specific environments or things. Um, I don't know if I mentioned, I know I said talking to a sponsor, safe people, but those dealing with addiction, highly, highly recommend going to some kind of support group, whether it's, sometimes therapists will have support groups. Those obviously cost money. But those would be the first pick if possible, because again, when it's led by a therapist, a specialist, trained professional, I just feel like it can be really, really helpful. But you can also, in addition to that, or if you don't have the means or resources, there are tons of free support groups like AA, NA. I know Al-Anon even has like online stuff. I'm sure the others do too, but you definitely want in person uh, for a while coming out of this place. Um, let's see, just making sure not only are you focusing on trying to get some self-care in, but also physical care, trying to maintain a balanced diet, trying to have some sort of regular movement or exercise, um, sleep. On one of my podcasts, I was saying I heard somewhere it's like something like 70 to 80% of our mental health is based on what we eat, how much we sleep, and how much we move our bodies. Like we need that physical health impacts everything. Our minds, our bodies are all so interconnected. Um, Also set achievable goals, again, it's not going to be realistic to say, I'm going to put 3 hours into all these good things each day when I work a 12-hour shift and I have to come home and help my kids with homework, but achievable goals. And break it up into short-term goals that you could do and long-term goals that you could set for yourself just to help you stay motivated. As you reach these goals, it kind of motivates you to keep trying and keep going. And just remembering too to like stop and smell the roses, stop and be present and mindful, stop and celebrate the small victories along the way. It's kind of like that saying, it's not the final destination that matters. It's your path, your journey getting there, right? We're never there. It's just like life is, I call it like the school of life. Like life is filled with learning and growing and evolving. And when you look at it like through that lens, doing the work just becomes second nature. Um, if you don't have a list of healthy coping strategies and helping cope healthy coping tools. Um, just with somebody, whether it's a sponsor or a therapist, come up with some. Identify triggers and create plans to manage them effectively. Um, start implementing those healthy coping mechanisms for stress and emotional challenges. That's something else. If you're in an inpatient facility, they should be teaching you coping strategies while you're there, and they should have that set up for you leaving. If they don't, do it yourself so that you can set yourself up for success. Um, you can even, well, I don't want to promote it because my kids are anti AI and all that stuff because I guess it's not good for the environment. But some people I know have found really good things on Chat GPT. So, managing finances and employment, you know, trying to set up, if you haven't already, some kind of like stable work environment or vocational training. Even work environment matters and counts. I'll just use an example. I'm not saying every restaurant is like this, but way back when I was in grad school and undergrad, I worked different jobs and I remember waitressing and hosting and, you know, sometimes in that environment, you meet all different kinds of people, and not all of them are on the path of healthiness. Not saying that's every restaurant, but just finding a job where, again, like-minded, on the path to learning and growing, and not a path where they're going to be like, oh, we just had a long shift. Let's go get drunk together. Because we as humans, we have a desire to belong and fit in. And, you might be tempted to say, like, oh, I'll just go and hang out, but I won't have any. Doesn't work like well. Um, Stay connected with the professional help. Make sure once you're out that you're keeping up with regular scheduling. Nowadays, a lot of therapists are jumping on the bandwagon, whether it's good or bad, but where they're starting to join these different platforms so that they can take insurance. A lot of therapists are now offering virtual, so it's so much easier to find in-network right from your home if you want or need. Sometimes the specialists are not in network, and you have to pay outright. That's hard for some people, but depending on your insurance, you could look into your out-of-network benefits. You could talk to them about a single case agreement where you explain, like, hey, all the regular therapists in network are not meeting the criteria for what I need for this specialty. I need you to set up the single case agreement so that you still have to pay everything outright, but then you get reimbursed everything but your copay. And it's like a win-win because the therapists are getting their full rate, which is very much deserved because usually specialists have had spent a lot of money on extra trainings and extra, and so they get their earnings, and then you can still get the good care you need. And you just have to do the work with your insurance once you get the receipts and the NPI number and the codes, and you just submit that and you get reimbursed everything but what your copay is. So that's another option a lot of people don't know about. Um, Lastly, just having emergency preparedness, have a relapse prevention plan in place. That was something like I would work on with. It's like, okay, when I'm in crisis, first off, if you don't already know, 988, it's free, it's confidential, it's 24/7. That's available to everyone from anywhere. But then you should be identifying, like, who are those safe people that I could reach out to in time of need? Where are safe places I can go? Even if it's like oh, I have nowhere to go and I need to get out of this environment. Like go to a 24-hour Walmart and just walk around or, just have, obviously I'm a nature person. So like for me, I love going to places that are calming and soothing. But if you live where I live and it's dead of winter and the middle of the night, you might not be able to go to nature. So 24-hour Walmart might work or um, just having a list of coping tools and strategies. I tell people all the time, I'm a therapist. I could teach you so many strategies with my eyes shut. But even for me, like for anybody, when we're in that activated, heightened state, all of those things we know out the window. Um, because we're in a different part of our brain and we're not able to access that information. So having a little cheat sheet ready and handy and easily accessible is really, really huge. Um, and then you can have like, if you're religious, you could have like, just scripture. If you're not, you can have like quotes or motivational things. And just positive affirmation, just a list of things that you can access and use if and when you need to. When you're in your wise mind, that's when you want to put together that list of affirmations and wise mind statements um, to help you through. So, anyway, I hope this helps. I know there's lots of people out there struggling with humaning and all the things. So if there's anybody that could benefit from this, please share. And again, sharing the podcast, rating the podcast, like putting maybe a 5-star up there or writing a little thing about what episode you like, that helps the podcast to keep coming up and making it more available to others. So I would appreciate that. Anyway, thank you for tuning in, however you are, and I hope you have a great day. Bye, everyone.